Hello everybody, welcome to a tutorial, I guess. Not necessarily strictly a tutorial because I'll be talking about other things as well, but you have no excuse to not have a scarf this winter, or a blanket, as long as you can get your hands on something that looks kind of like this. Some reasonably chunky yarn, or something that might be half this size, because you can combine them, use 2 threads instead of 1, and then you can make a blanket or a scarf. And maybe a hat as well, but that might be a little bit more difficult. I want to make a scarf out of these. I've got 3 of them right here. 1, 2, 3, there you go. A little bit like that. You can see all 3 of them. These I got at the Action, and they're partially made out of wool. Let me just check. 89% wool, 9% acrylic, and 2% polyester. So that is actually pretty good to keep warm, because wool is really good at keeping the heat in and the water out, because it has some water deflecting properties. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. Either way, it's good. So I got these at the Action, which is a fairly cheap store here in the Netherlands. They do tend to have wool stuff like this, but then smaller, like maybe a quarter of the size of this thread. And it's fairly cheap. So if you can get your hands on some of this, you should be able to follow along after rewatching it a couple of times, of course, because you really only need to know one move for making a blanket or a scarf. So now we're going to do that in a moment. The only problem I have with the Action, just by the side, or as an aside, is that they're fairly infrequent with what type of yarn they have and what colors they have it in, because this, I've never seen this before at the Action. This probably is a new thing that they're making, I don't know. But they had about 6 of these skeins, and they were all in different colors. So I have to pick a bunch of different ones. That's why we now have Neapolitan ice cream, I think this is. I don't know. I thought I could do something like this combination. Like start with the white with the red, and then go on to the pink, and then go on to the gray. I'm actually not going to make a blanket out of this one. I'm going to make a scarf, because I've actually already made a blanket with a white and pink pattern. That's for the dog to sleep on during the winter. She likes soft things as well, and warm things, because even though she has a coat, it doesn't mean she doesn't get cold. I have 3 different colors, so I kind of want to do 1 row each, and then move on to the previous line. Do a row with white, do a row with pink, do a row with gray, so to speak, and then switch back and forth. So I'm going to make it a little bit more difficult on myself by constantly switching. But I want to show you the start at least, so you know what you need to do in order to start making your own scarf. So like I said, there's no excuse this winter if you can get your hands on something like this. I think 3 or 2 might already be enough of one of these. I think one of these is big enough just to make a hat already. If you did want to try making a hat, there are those plastic loom rings that you can use. That's like a knit ring, I think they call those. They can be bought at... if you're in the Netherlands, you can probably get those at the Zeeman, or what's the other one called? The Vibra? Maybe. I don't know. Kruidvat might have them. They're usually fairly popular, and they're also very often found in secondhand stores that have a lot of different stuff. So if you do have a fairly large secondhand store nearby, you can probably get some loom rings or something along those lines, and maybe even some of this yarn, because some of the times you will just dump this stuff in bulk, and then you can get a whole bunch for almost nothing. So that's great. That's where I get most of my yarn anyway, because they do tend to rack up quite a nice bill after a while. But anyway, let's get started with the basic move that everybody needs to know. You need 1 move to get started, which is a slip knot. So we're going to go put these guys away for a second. And you need a long smooth table space as well, or something along those lines you can shove things back and forth on, because if it's going to be a blanket, you're going to have a fairly large blanket just laying here at one point, and you need to be able to go back and forth with it without knocking stuff over. So that's one other requirement. But other than that, you can do it on the floor if you don't have a large smooth table space. As long as you can get to all the different things. Right, I'm taking this thing off right here. This is called Allison and May from the Action. And as you can see here, this is what it's made out of. It's pretty good, actually. Like I said, wool is a pretty good material for keeping warm. I see the strand is already loose over here. Alright, so what we do, give ourselves a little bit of space. We need to make a slip knot. Now, slip knot, there's very difficult ways to explain it, but the simplest way that I've always found it is if you just take the thing, make a loop, like this. Can you see that? This thing is on top and then the other ones are at the bottom. And now you want to turn it around because we need to get this thing a little bit more. And there we go. So the loop over here has this side on top. I'll move my finger out of the way. There we go. This strand is on top. This one's in the back. You want to take the yarn, this working yarn, and push it through this way so that when you do that you get a little knot, but it's not a solid knot. It's something that will tighten up like that. See? So I'll do that again. Slipknot might be the most tricky thing for people to get a hang of, but once you figured it out, it's extremely easy. So all you really do is make a loop like this, and then the part where the yarn at the end is on top, that's where you put the yarn through here, and then the yarn that comes out the other side is your loop. Like this. That is the loop. This is the slip knot. There we go. That's all you really need to know. So now we've got our first chain. Well, not yet. This is the loop, but we're going to put this thing through the back like so. So now you have two loops right here, and that's all you need to do. You just take the yarn and put it through the back of the loop that you're currently working on. You can make these loops as big and as small as you want them to. Depends on how much space you want between the bits of yarn. I'm going to keep mine roughly like this, and then I'm just going to keep going until I have the length that I want, because we're working on the length right now because I'm making a scarf. Once you stop adding loops to the chain, that's as wide or long as your work's going to be. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can always take it apart, of course, if you've made a mistake. But anyway, so all I'm going to do now is going to make a long chain, and when I think I have a length that I think would be a good scarf, I'm going to stop and turn around. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. And it kind of looks like crocheting this part, because this is also the chain that you make for the most projects for crocheting. Like that. There we go. Always make sure to give yourself a lot of yarn to work with, because otherwise things can get very tight and then your loops might become uneven. And how long of a scarf should I make it? I usually like them to be fairly long. This one's going to be a little bit roomy. It's going to have a good amount of space between the chains, I think. But I think that's good because that'll trap warm air. And that's sort of how you stay warm. You put something around yourself, and then that makes it so that the warm air that you produce, which from body heat, gets trapped, and that's what keeps you warm. So that's how heating works. And there we go. If you don't know what I'm doing right now, just refer back to a couple of minutes ago when I told you how to make a loop, because that's all I'm doing right now. I'm going to keep going, and then when it's time to go for the second row, I will pause again, and then I'll show you what happens next. Also, don't worry if it looks a little bit messy. The first line, your first chain, is always going to look a little messy because it's moving all over the place. But as soon as you've got a few rows done, a few extra rows this way, it's going to settle down and actually get a shape. So no need to worry too much. I'll probably link a video in the description of somebody who made a whole blanket doing this, because she's much better at explaining it, I think, and you can always rewatch that video, of course, while you're doing it, or probably you should watch it all the way through before starting. And then when you think you have a good idea, put the video on and just pause while you catch up, so to speak, and then you can learn it that way. One of the reasons why I really like chunky yarn like this is because you can very quickly make something out of it. I'm also currently knitting a sweater with yarn about this size, and it goes very quickly, particularly on really large needles that I got the other day. They're just the biggest needles I've ever seen. They are 15 millimeters and they're about the size of like a candlestick, so they're pretty big, and things go very quickly on that. As long as I make sure to stick to the correct pattern, things work fairly well. But it's November, and that is National Novel Writing Month. That means I don't really have a lot of time for crafting this month. Every day I gotta make sure to get my word count in. It's about, I like to go for 1,700 words a day, so that I have a little bit of leeway in case I have a busy day that I can't do any writing at all. That's been caught up with, or that I can catch up easily. So every day after work, on the weekend of course I have a little bit more time, but every day after work I have to go and do my usual things, like if I gotta go to a store I gotta do that real quick, and then of course the usual things like the streams and stuff has to happen, and after that it's all just trying to write, and most of that is going slowly. I'm not super happy with this year's project, but you know, it's more of an exercise this year because I have another type of story that I was working on last year that I wanted to actually edit into something legible, but I don't want to do that during NaNoWriMo, because NaNoWriMo for me is really like, okay, we're starting a new story and therefore we need to come up with something new. So the chain right now, by the way, is about the length of my table, which is about 1.30 1.50 meters. Don't think that's a good length for a scarf, so I'm gonna go a bit further. I think I'll do a third more, and then I'm gonna go and turn around. So if I just do it like this, keep going, and then hopefully we'll be able to attach the next color, which is gonna be pink. And like I said, if you have, or if you can find a bunch of skeins with all the same color, then you don't have to do any switching. You can just keep going. Only time you need to attach another skein is when the first one runs out, which is as simple as making a knot. So I'll show that as well. Okay, let me check. So it reaches the table end and then it goes over the ledge about a third further. I think this is the length that I want. So I'm now going to cut this length here, and then I'm going to go and turn around with another color. So I'm going to grab my scissors over here. I'm going to make a snip a little bit further away from the loop so it's not right at the loop, so I have a bit of space. This one goes to the side, and we're picking up this pink one. That one also needs to be undone. Now I don't know where they get this wool. It's fairly simple, so maybe they just kind of have like a leftovers bin somewhere at some wool factory or place. Let me see where the end is, and then that's what makes the yarn. Don't mind either way because that means we have cheap wool to work with. Where's the end for this one? We got a little thing coming out. I think it's over here somewhere. There it is. Took a minute to find it, but here it is. Okay, so we got this end, we've got this end. With this type of wool, I tend to just tie a simple knot and then pull it as tight as I can so that it doesn't come off too easily. Come undone, so push it right through. There, and then I just pull it really tight like this. Also, I like to pull it like this. And from above as well, so that both sides have had a bit of tightening. Now this part gets to come off. There, a little bit of extra stuff off to the side with you. All right, so we have this chain here, and here's the last loop. I gotta turn this around a little bit because it's starting to pull off the table. This is why I need a long space to work with. There we go. Okay, so we have this loop here, and this is going to be the first loop of the next line. So we're gonna turn it a little bit so that it faces upwards. And then we're gonna take the previous loop, the top piece of yarn, I guess, of the previous loop, and you're gonna pull the next loop through there. Now there's a little knot here, but that's fine. And then we're going to identify the loop before that. That's this one over here. Can you see that? This one is the next loop. We put it through this one, now we're putting it through this one, so we're pulling this one up a little bit, like so, and then we're gonna pull you through here. There. So now we have 3 loops on the new row. Can you see that? Like this might be easier to see. So you got 3 loops on the new row. We're just going to keep going from loop to loop. So this is the next one over here. Can you see that? I'm going to pull it through here as well. You might want to give it a little bit more space. There we go. So that when you pull on the yarn again to put it through the next loop, you don't end up pulling this one back out. So we're going to go to the one after that, which is this one, and we're going to put it through there. So like I said, the first row or 2 are going to be very fiddly. Don't worry too much about it. It's going to be fine. Just keep going. So eventually you want to have another loop in every one of the loops you made for the initial chain. So you just keep going like that all the way back to the start, and then you're going to do the exact same thing. So when you get to the end, you probably want to flip it over so that you can just go back that way. Unless you like to work the other way around, then make sure to do it the other way around, whichever is the most comfortable for you. So I'm going to put this aside for a second so I can see what I'm doing, because I need to be in here. So we're just going to keep going like that. And then over here, it's a little difficult to show what I'm doing, but I'm just going through the loops that I just made backwards, and then pulling the loops through the top of the loops that we made earlier in our initial chain. And I've got a pink row this time instead of a white one, so we're gonna have a pink and white scarf starts at the start of this. It also has determined the length of yarn that I'll be using from each of these skeins. Still got a good amount left of the first one, so I think I'm going to be able to go back and forth at least another 2-3 times with this bit. So I think each of these will give me at least 3 rows, probably 4, and that'll make it a fairly wide scarf. I think that's nice, that's good. You can wrap it around yourself and feel nice and warm. That's awesome. So we're just going to keep going. It might help pulling the loops through without losing any of the previous loops if you put your finger like on here where you're pulling through the next loop. So you can kind of trap this loop in place by pushing the working end side of the loop down onto the table so that it doesn't get pulled along when you go and pull the yarn through the next loop, so to speak. So I just trap it with my ring finger on over here like that, and then I pull it through this one, and then I have another good loop here. So I just trap it next over here, use my index finger to grab the yarn through the next loop. So you're just looping the entire time, that's all it is. It's one big loop exercise, and eventually it's going to look like you knitted it with actual needles. So there's that. People can be very impressed with your knitting skills, even though you didn't actually use any knitting needles, just your hands. So you can fool everybody and be warm at the same time. What's better than that? Okay, there we go. Okay, we're pretty much on the end here. Now we have the slip knot on the end. Right there. It's not really a good thing to put it through there, so we're going to leave the slip knot alone. Can you see that? Right there. We're leaving this bit alone. I'm going to just pull the loop through the first chain that we made, the last first chain. Now I have a whole bunch of this, so I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to attach the gray one next so I can get a gray row in. And eventually I'm going to have a scarf with a bunch of different colors. That's going to be fun. So if or when I'm done, I'll post a picture on Discord, and if you are on Discord you can see it, but you can also just imagine that it's going to be a very long fluffy scarf like this, and we're going to have a lot of fun wearing it. At least it's going to be nice and warm. It's okay if it doesn't look completely even. You may have like maybe skipped a row somewhere, possibly. I think I got all of them. And like I said, it's fairly easy. Just pull it apart, do it again, particularly in the first row phase, because you haven't really spent that much time on it. And then you can just get started and do it right. Or if you're not too bothered by it, just leave it in there. It doesn't really matter. If you just want to be warm, then you can just go and live with that little imperfection. No problems there either. Either way, thanks for watching. Hope you're doing well. And I'll see you Tuesday for Stardew Valley. And if not, then perhaps Friday for our Minecraft expedition into the bottle map. Further to the next bottles. And make sure to tune in for that. Either way, bye-bye for now.